My name is Myra, and I'm 33. That condo cost me 7 years of my life. 7 years without vacations, eating cold leftovers over my desk, working doubles on weekends, turning down things that people my age just took for granted. Every dollar I scraped together went straight into that down payment. When I finally signed the papers, I sat in my car and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, but because of the kind of relief you only feel after carrying something impossibly heavy for way too long. That place was mine. A top-floor, two-bedroom corner unit with a view of the city. $350,000. My name on the deed. My future, finally solid. That Christmas was at my parents' house, like always. My mom had the tree up the day after Thanksgiving, the kind that belonged in a store window, immaculate, every ornament deliberately placed. The whole house smelled like cinnamon and roasted chicken. My sister Nora showed up with her husband Brett and their 2 kids. Brett had been out of work for almost a year and a half. Nobody said it out loud, but it hung over the table like an uninvited guest. I was in the kitchen pouring water when I caught my father's voice drifting in from the living room. He was speaking in that low, measured tone he uses when he's already made up his mind and is just informing people now. I didn't move, just stood there, glass in hand, listening. He was telling Brett and Nora they needed stability, that the kids deserved a real home, that it wasn't fair for a family to be crammed into a 2-bedroom rental while they figured things out. Then he said it, plain as weather, that my condo would be the perfect solution. That he and Mom had discussed it, that since I was single, I could always find something else, rent smaller for a while, maybe even move back home temporarily while I saved again. He said it like it was a done deal, like the only thing left was to tell me. My mother's voice followed, softer, agreeing. She said I was practical, that I'd understand, that I'd always been the strong one, the one who made things work. She said Nora's family needed it more. I stood there in that kitchen for what felt like forever. The water in my glass was completely still. I didn't burst in. I didn't raise my voice. I walked back to the dining room, put my glass down, and sat in my chair. When my father looked at me across the table with that face, the one he wears when he's about to give you news disguised as a favor, I smiled. Kept my expression totally calm. I asked him to pass the bread. He did. Dinner went on. Nora kept glancing at me sideways the whole evening. Brett looked relieved in that limp way men do when someone else has fixed their problem. My mother touched my arm twice during dessert, little pats meant to say something. I smiled through every bit of it. I laughed at my nephew's joke about his teacher. I helped clear plates. When I hugged everyone goodbye at the door, I held my mother just a second longer than usual. She whispered in my hair that she knew I'd understand. I told her of course I did, and I meant it. I loved her. But love and understanding aren't the same thing, and she'd confused them her whole life. I drove home that night in dead silence. No music.
No podcast.
Nothing. Just city lights sliding past my windows and the low hum of the engine. By the time I pulled into my building's garage, I'd already made my decision. Not out of anger. Not dramatic or impulsive. It was just the logical outcome of what I'd overheard. They'd made a plan for my life, without asking me a single question. So I decided to make one too. And I was going to move a lot faster than they expected. I called my realtor the next morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Sandra, she'd sold me the place 3 years earlier. She knew the building, the market, and most importantly, how to act fast when needed. I told her I wanted to list immediately and close before year's end. She paused for exactly 2 seconds, then said she had a cash buyer who'd been circling the building for months, waiting for a unit to open. I told her to make the call. She asked if I was sure. I said I'd never been more certain of anything. What my parents didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that I'd received a job offer 4 months earlier from a firm in Denver. Senior role, 30% pay bump, full relocation package. I'd been sitting on it, going back and forth, held back by the pull of familiarity that keeps people in places they've quietly outgrown. Christmas dinner made the call for me. I accepted the offer the same morning I called Sandra. By the time my family sat down to leftover turkey the next day, I'd already set 2 things in motion that couldn't be undone. The cash sale closed in 11 days. 11. The buyer didn't haggle, didn't ask for repairs, didn't stall on inspections. He wanted the unit, and he paid for it. I walked out of the title office on December 29th with a cashier's check and a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I stood on the sidewalk, looked up at the gray winter sky, and let out a slow breath. Then I went back to the condo that was no longer mine, which I'd arranged to vacate by the 31st, and finished packing. I'd already shipped 3 boxes to Denver. My car was loaded with everything else that counted. I gave my furniture to a neighbor just starting out who needed it more than I needed the hassle of moving it. I kept my bed until the last night, then left that behind too. On the morning of December 31st, New Year's Eve, I handed the keys to the new owner's property manager, walked down to my car, and drove away. I didn't call my parents. Didn't call Nora. Didn't send a message, leave a note, or post anything online. I just left. I was 4 hours out of the city when my phone first buzzed. My mother. I let it ring. Then my father. Then Nora. Then Brett, which surprised me, because Brett had never once called me directly in the 3 years he'd been married to my sister. I kept driving. Stopped once for gas and coffee. By the time I was back on the highway, the missed calls were piling up in a way that would have been almost funny under different circumstances. By the time I reached my hotel that night, I had 79 missed calls between the 4 of them. 79. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and scrolled through the logs slowly, the way you read something you want to fully absorb. My mother had called 23 times. My father 11. Nora had somehow managed 31, which told me she'd found out about the sale before my parents did, probably through a neighbor or someone connected to the building. Brett had called 14 times, which told me everything I needed to know about what was really driving the panic on their end. I texted my mother one message. The condo sold on the 29th. I've relocated for work. I'm safe. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. I love you. Then I turned my phone off, ordered room service, and watched the New Year's Eve countdown on a TV in a hotel room in a city that didn't know my name yet. When the ball dropped, I sat quietly with a ginger ale and thought about the woman who'd stood in her parents' kitchen 8 days earlier, holding a glass of still water, listening to her future being casually handed to someone else. I thought about how small she'd felt in that moment, and how different she felt now. Nobody gives away what you've built without consequences. Not parents. Not sisters. Not anyone who assumes your silence means agreement. I'd spent 33 years being the strong one, the practical one, the one who figured things out. They were right about that part. What they miscalculated was what I'd figure out once they showed me exactly who they were at that Christmas dinner table. Denver was cold and unfamiliar and completely mine. I slept better that night than I had in years, and I haven't looked back since. If this story hit different for you, you already know what to do. Subscribe to the channel. More stories like this every single week, from people who stopped waiting for permission and started living on their own terms.